When the city went quiet, I did not leave. Many people packed their cars and disappeared before the roads were closed, but I stayed. My cafe was on the corner of a small street near the harbor. It was not a famous place, but people from the neighborhood used to come every morning for coffee. The smell of bread and sugar always filled the air. I kept the lights on because I could not stand the silence. Outside, everything looked empty and gray. The buses stopped running, the schools were closed, and even the birds seemed to sing less. I remember the morning they announced that the sickness had reached our part of the city. The radio said we should not leave our homes except for food or medicine. I was standing behind the counter, wiping a cup that no one had used, when the words sank into me. I looked around my cafe and thought of the people who used to sit near the window, talking about the sea, their families, their plans. All of them were gone now. It felt like the world had taken a deep breath and decided not to speak again. My name is Clara, and I have lived in this city all my life. I was born here, and I buried my parents here. When I was younger, I always wanted to travel somewhere else, but I never did. My cafe became my home, my little world. It had warm walls, a small kitchen, and one old lamp outside that shone brighter than anything on the street. When everything closed, that light became something different. It was not only a lamp anymore. It was a sign that someone was still here. At first, I opened the cafe only for myself. I told myself it was just to keep busy, but the truth was that I needed to believe life had not stopped completely. I boiled water, made coffee, and listened to the radio even when there was nothing new to hear. The same numbers were repeated every hour. More people sick. More people dying. Stay inside. Stay calm. Sometimes I sat near the window and looked across the street at the dark shops and empty houses. I wondered who was still inside them. One afternoon, while I was cleaning the floor, I saw an old man walking slowly along the pavement. He was wearing a mask and carrying a small bag. His head was down, but when he saw my light on, he stopped. He looked at the door, hesitated, then pushed it open. I was surprised. No one had come in for days. He stood there for a moment, holding his hat in his hand. I could see his eyes above the mask. They looked tired but kind. "Are you still open?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yes. You can sit wherever you like." He sat near the window and ordered a black coffee. I made it carefully, trying not to get too close, though I did not want to seem afraid. When I put the cup on his table, he said thank you in a soft voice and smiled with his eyes. For a few minutes, there was a kind of peace between us. We did not speak much. I think he needed silence more than words. When he left, he put some coins on the table and said, "It's good you keep the light on. It makes people feel less alone." That night, I sat in the dark corner of my cafe and thought about what he said. Maybe the light was not only for me. Maybe it helped others too. I started to leave it on all night. From the window upstairs, I could see the reflection of the lamp on the wet street. It looked like a small sun that refused to die. The days began to mix together. Every morning, I opened the door, even if no one came. Sometimes a delivery truck stopped and dropped off a box of bread or milk. The drivers never got out of their vehicles. They just waved and drove away. I would bring the boxes inside, wash my hands again and again, and try not to think too much. I began to keep a small notebook where I wrote down everything I saw or felt. I wrote about the sky, the smell of the sea, the sound of the ambulance sirens far away. Writing helped me stay calm. One evening, when I was closing the shutters, I saw someone sitting on the steps outside. It was a young woman, maybe in her 20s. She looked pale and cold. I asked her if she needed help, but she did not answer. I gave her some water and a piece of bread. She ate slowly, almost afraid to take it. Then she told me her name was Sarah. She had come to the city to study medicine, but when the sickness began, her student apartment was closed. She had nowhere to go. I told her she could stay upstairs, at least for a few nights. She said thank you in a voice that sounded broken. After that, we were 2 people in the cafe instead of 1. During the day, Sarah helped me clean and prepare the little food we had left. At night, we sat near the window and watched the empty street. Sometimes she talked about her parents who lived in another city, and sometimes she stayed quiet for hours. We both tried to be brave, but I could see fear in her eyes when the sirens grew louder. The sickness did not stop. Every day there were new reports, new warnings. Hospitals were full, and people began to lose hope. I often thought of my mother and how she used to light a candle during storms, saying that light was stronger than fear. I remembered her words each time I looked at the lamp outside. The light never went out, not even during power cuts. I checked the wires often, afraid it might fail. I told Sarah it was our promise to the city. Weeks passed like this. Then one morning, I found a note pushed under the door. It said, "Thank you for keeping the light on. I walk past every night on my way to work at the hospital. It reminds me that not everything is lost." There was no name on the note, only a small red cross drawn in the corner. I held the paper for a long time. It felt like a message from the world, a sign that what we were doing mattered. Sarah cried when she read it. I think it gave her strength. She said she wanted to help at the hospital when it was safe. I told her she was already helping by staying kind and calm when others were afraid. That evening, we made extra sandwiches and left them outside for anyone who might pass by. We did not know who took them, but every morning they were gone. Sometimes I dreamed that the city was full again. In my dreams, people sat in the cafe, laughing and drinking coffee like before. Then I would wake up and hear the wind through the empty streets, and the dream would break like glass. Still, I told myself that everything we were doing, no matter how small, was part of something larger. One night, after many weeks, Sarah woke me up. She said someone was knocking on the door. We went downstairs and saw a man in a hospital uniform. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. He said they needed hot drinks for the night shift. Their machine had broken, and someone had told them our cafe was still open. I did not think twice. We made as much coffee as we could and filled several large thermos bottles. The man thanked us again and again. Before he left, he said, "You two are like the last streetlight in this city." After he was gone, I stood at the window and watched the empty road. The lamp outside flickered for a second, then grew bright again. I smiled because I knew it was true. We were still here, still shining, even in the darkest hour. That night, for the first time in months, I felt something warm inside me. It was not happiness exactly. It was courage, the kind that comes quietly, without noise or pride, when you realize that even one small light can keep the darkness away. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. The next morning, the air was colder than usual. The sea wind came through the narrow streets and made the windows shake. I woke early and looked outside. The sky was covered with thick gray clouds. The lamp outside still burned softly, like an eye that refused to close. Sarah was already in the kitchen, boiling water and counting the little bags of coffee we had left. She said we could make it last a few more days if we were careful. I nodded and smiled, though inside I felt worried. The man from the hospital returned that afternoon. His name was Daniel. He said they had more people than beds now. He looked so tired that I offered him a seat and poured him a cup of tea. He told us about the other workers, the nurses and cleaners who had not gone home in weeks. His voice was low, but I could hear the sadness behind his words. I asked if he wanted us to prepare more drinks that evening, and he said yes. When he left, he thanked us again and said the same thing as before, that we were the last streetlight. After he was gone, Sarah and I worked quietly. We filled bottles, wrapped some bread, and prepared soup. The cafe smelled warm and alive again. For a few hours, it almost felt like the old days. When we finished, I wrote a small note and put it in one of the boxes. It said, "For all who are still fighting, you are not alone." At night, I could not sleep. The sound of sirens came from the direction of the hospital. I sat by the window, watching the street below. It was raining again, and the light outside reflected on the wet ground. I saw shadows move from time to time, people walking quickly with masks and bags. I knew some of them were workers going home after long shifts. Every time I saw someone pass, I whispered quietly to myself, "You are not alone." It became a small prayer I repeated without thinking. The next day, Sarah said she wanted to go with Daniel to help at the hospital. She was studying medicine before everything stopped, and she felt it was her duty. I wanted to say no because I was afraid for her, but I saw the determination in her eyes. She said she would be careful and wear protection. I helped her pack a small bag with gloves, masks, and a bottle of disinfectant. When she left, she hugged me quickly and said she would come back soon. I watched her walk away until she disappeared at the end of the street. The cafe felt too quiet without her. I cleaned the tables again, though they were already clean. I boiled water, even though there was no one to serve. I tried to read, but my mind kept going back to the image of her walking into the cold gray morning. That night, the lamp outside flickered for a long time. I thought it might go out, but it didn't. It stayed alive, like it was waiting with me. 2 days passed before I saw Sarah again. She came back late in the evening, her clothes smelling of disinfectant and tiredness. She smiled faintly and said the hospital was full, but everyone was trying their best. She looked thinner, but her eyes were bright. I made her tea, and we sat together near the window. She said one of the doctors had fallen sick, and many nurses were replacing him. She also said that some people had begun to recover, though many still struggled. Listening to her, I felt both hope and sadness. In the following weeks, Sarah spent more time at the hospital. I stayed at the cafe and prepared food for her to take with her. Sometimes Daniel came to pick it up when she was too busy. He always looked the same, quiet but strong. I admired him. He said the light outside helped them find their way when they walked home at night. It became something they looked for, a sign that reminded them to keep going. I never imagined one small lamp could mean so much. As the sickness spread, more parts of the city were closed. Soldiers patrolled the main streets. The news said the hospitals were near collapse. People grew tired of being afraid. Sometimes they shouted from their windows at night, asking when it would end. I listened to them and felt their pain. I wished I could answer, but I did not have any answers myself. All I could do was keep the cafe open, clean the tables, and let the light burn. One evening, a woman knocked on the door. She was wearing an old coat and looked cold. She said she was a cleaner at the hospital and had missed the last bus home. She asked if she could sit inside until morning. I let her in and gave her soup. She said her name was Elena. She told me about her 2 children who were staying with her mother in another town. She had not seen them for a month. While she spoke, her hands were shaking. I realized she was not only cold, but afraid. I told her she could rest upstairs, and she thanked me again and again. Before she went up, she touched the window and looked at the lamp outside. She said, "That light saved me tonight." After she left the next morning, I went outside to check the lamp. The glass was dirty from the rain, so I cleaned it carefully. I looked up at the sky. It was still gray, but there was a small line of light on the horizon. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the cold air. For the first time in a long while, I felt like something inside me was healing. That same week, Daniel came to the cafe looking worse than before. His voice was hoarse, and his hands shook when he lifted his cup. I asked if he was all right. He said he was fine, only tired. But I could see he was hiding something. Later that night, Sarah came home early with red eyes. She told me Daniel was sick. They had taken him to one of the small rooms in the hospital where they kept the patients who could still breathe on their own. She said he did not want her to visit him, afraid she might catch it too. I did not know what to say. We sat in silence for a long time. I could hear the rain outside and the faint sound of the lamp buzzing. I thought about Daniel's calm voice, his tired smile, and the way he always thanked us. I told Sarah that he was strong and would recover. She nodded, but her eyes filled with tears. That night, she did not sleep, and neither did I. The next morning, she went to the hospital again. She promised to be careful. I stayed behind, watching from the window until she was gone. The streets were completely empty now. Even the pigeons had disappeared. I turned on the radio, but there was only static. I sat at the counter and wrote in my notebook. I wrote about Daniel and the people who walked past our light at night. I wrote about fear and kindness and the strange beauty that sometimes appeared in the middle of sadness. Writing helped me believe we were still part of something human. 3 days later, Sarah returned. She said Daniel's fever had gone down and he was breathing better. The doctors were hopeful. I felt so relieved that I started to laugh, even though I had not laughed in weeks. She said many people in the hospital were improving too. The numbers on the radio finally started to go down. For the first time, the word recovery appeared more than the word death. That night, I walked outside and stood under the lamp. The air smelled of salt and smoke, but I could also smell spring somewhere in the distance. I thought about all the people who had passed this light. Some were gone, some were still fighting, but all of them had left a small part of their courage behind. I touched the cold metal pole and whispered thank you. When I went back inside, Sarah was sitting at the table reading. She looked up and smiled. She said the city was planning to reopen small parts soon. Schools might start again, and buses would return. We both knew it would never be the same, but maybe it could still be good. Before we went to sleep, she said quietly, "Do you think people will remember us?" I told her it didn't matter if they remembered our names. What mattered was that they remembered the light. As I closed my eyes that night, I could still see the glow of it through the window. It was small but steady, a quiet reminder that even the darkest season must end. The spring came slowly. It did not arrive with sunshine or celebration, but quietly, like someone who knocks before entering a sick room. The air became softer, and the sky showed small pieces of blue between the clouds. The trees near the harbor began to grow new leaves. After months of cold gray mornings, I felt something gentle return to the world. People started to walk outside again, though still with masks and distance. When I looked from my cafe window, I saw life coming back one careful step at a time. Sarah began to smile more often. She said Daniel was recovering well and might come back to help at the hospital soon. Every evening she brought small pieces of news. Some patients were strong again. Some families had reunited after long separation. There were still many who suffered, but the silence of despair had started to break. I listened to her and felt proud, not only of hers but of everyone who had stayed to help when it was hardest. I cleaned the cafe again that week. The smell of soap and coffee mixed together, and it felt like a promise. I opened the windows and let the sea air in. For the first time in many months, I wrote on a small board outside, "Coffee served again." It was a strange feeling, both hopeful and frightening. I did not know if anyone would come, but I decided to wait, just like before. The first person who entered was an old woman with white hair. She was wearing gloves and a thick coat. She looked around carefully, as if she was not sure it was real. When I asked what she wanted, she said she would like some tea, just to sit and feel normal for a while. I brought her a cup, and she closed her eyes when she tasted it. Then she looked at the lamp outside and said, "I used to walk past here every night when my husband was in the hospital. That light gave me courage. I am happy to see it is still shining." I could not answer for a moment because I felt tears in my eyes. After she left, more people began to come, 1 or 2 each day. They were quiet, careful, and grateful. Some of them told me small stories. A man said he had been sick and survived. A young woman said her sister had returned from the hospital. Everyone carried something heavy inside, but they were also beginning to carry hope. The cafe slowly became what it once was, a place for tired people to rest and remember that they were not alone. Sarah returned to her studies part-time. The university had reopened a few classes online, and she helped at the hospital only in the mornings. I missed her presence during the day, but I was happy she was building her life again. Daniel visited us one evening. He looked thinner but stronger. He thanked us for everything we had done. I told him we had done very little, but he said that keeping the cafe open and the light burning had been more than enough. He said many workers had looked for that light when everything felt dark. We sat together and talked for a long time. He told me about his family in another town and how he hoped to visit them soon. When he left, he looked up at the lamp outside and smiled. I knew then that even if one day the light went out, its meaning would stay. As the weeks passed, the streets filled again with footsteps and voices. Shops reopened, and the smell of fresh bread came back to the air. People were still careful, but they began to greet each other again. The first time I heard laughter on the street, it almost shocked me. It sounded strange after so many months of silence, but it was beautiful too. It reminded me that we were still capable of joy. The radio started to play music instead of numbers. The news was still serious, but it also spoke about recovery, rebuilding, and lessons learned. I listened every morning while preparing coffee. Sometimes I still caught myself expecting bad news, but slowly my heart began to trust again. Life, fragile as it was, had returned. One evening, I walked along the harbor. The air was cool, and the water reflected the lights of the city. I had not walked there since before the lockdown. I watched the fishermen repairing their nets, the small boats moving gently with the tide. Everything looked different, yet it was the same. I realized that the city had survived, but it would never forget what had happened. Neither would I. When I came back, I saw a group of children playing near the cafe. They were drawing with chalk on the ground. I stopped and looked closer. They had drawn a picture of a big yellow lamp and written the words, "The last street light," beside it. One of the children looked up and said, "We draw this light because my mother says it helped her when she was scared." I smiled and told them they could keep drawing as long as they wanted. I watched them for a while, their hands moving quickly, their laughter filling the air. It was the best sound I had heard all year. That night, I sat in my small room above the cafe and opened my notebook again. I had stopped writing for a few weeks, but now I felt ready. I wrote about the children, about Daniel, about Sarah, and about the people who had come back. I wrote that courage was not a loud thing. It was quiet and patient. It was the act of staying when you want to run, of helping when you are afraid, of lighting one small lamp even when the world feels dark. As I wrote, I heard the door open downstairs. When I went down, I saw Sarah holding a small box. She said it was for me. Inside was a new lamp, simple but strong, with a soft golden glow. She said it was a gift from the hospital workers, a way to say thank you. They had collected money together and bought it for the cafe. I did not know what to say. I felt the kind of happiness that is quiet, but deep. We replaced the old lamp that night. The new one shone even brighter. Its light fell across the street and touched the walls of the opposite buildings. For a moment, the whole street looked alive again. We stood there together, silent but smiling. The world around us was still uncertain, but that light made it feel safe again. In the following months, the cafe became busy once more. People came not only for coffee, but also to talk. Some wanted to share what they had lost. Others wanted to remember the people who had helped them. I listened to all of them. Each story was different, but all of them carried the same message. People survive through one another. When one heart stays open, others can find their way. Sarah finished her studies the next year and became a doctor. She moved to another city, but she still visited sometimes. Every time she came, she said the same thing. You were the first person who taught me that courage can be simple. I always told her that she had found her own courage long ago. I still run the cafe today. The city is louder now, full of cars and laughter again. Sometimes I sit by the window at night and watch people passing by. Many of them are young and do not know what happened here. But I see them look at the lamp outside, and I can tell that something about its light makes them slow down for a moment. Some of them smile. That is enough for me. On the first anniversary of the lockdown's end, the local newspaper printed a small article. It was about the people who had stayed and helped others. There was a short paragraph about a small cafe near the harbor that kept its light on through the worst nights. It said that the lamp had become a symbol of courage for many in the city. They called it the last street light. I cut out the article and kept it in my notebook. Sometimes people ask me if I was afraid during those months. I tell them yes, I was. Everyone was. But courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to keep going even when you are afraid. That is what I learned from that time. When I look back, I do not remember only the pain or the loneliness. I remember the kindness of strangers, the small hands of children drawing on the street, and the gentle sound of Sarah's laughter. Every evening, before I lock the doors, I step outside and look up at the lamp. It has been replaced twice since then, but it still shines in the same soft color. It reminds me that even the smallest light can guide someone home. I stand there for a few minutes, breathe in the sea air, and whisper a quiet thank you. The light flickers a little, like it is answering me. Then I go inside, close the door, and let it shine through the night. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.